Hi guys, welcome back to our aquariums. I'm Matt. Today I'm doing another one of my coral profiles, or coral care videos. Today's coral is the fungia plate coral. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that 100% correctly, the fungia part, but that's how I read it anyways. These are pretty cool corals as coral goes, just because they're so different, to me anyways. In person they're really stunning greens, or they can come in a variation of colors, but mine here is kind of a green with kind of a pinkish mouth. They can get pretty decent sized. This one is actually a baby off of a parent colony that was about the size of a basketball before it started to go into reproductive mode and splitting. And that's like I said, one of the random things about this coral is that it has several ways it can reproduce. It can sexually reproduce with a male and a female. It can also split itself or clone itself. It can also release eggs or spores into the water that become itself. And this is kind of a unique one because even if it dies, don't take it out of your tank, because up to a year later, the skeleton can actually regenerate spores called daughter corals, and actually regenerate those and have itself come back. So they're really kind of different in that sense. There are a few other corals that do it like that, but it's one of those ones that's kind of just different because it has so many different ways it can reproduce. And that's what's kind of cool about this one. This one actually came off of, like I said, a mother colony that was in a much larger tank, and a power head fell on the coral, and it killed half the coral, and the other half of the coral went into reproductive mode and let out tons of these little babies, and the lady brought these babies into the store, and I purchased some of them. So this one on the back side, you can't really see it, but it's actually splitting into 3 other ones, so I'll have separate ones as it splits out. So as far as this coral goes, it really, if you read about it, they're supposed to be pretty hard, or one of the more difficult corals, but actually in my experience they've been pretty easy. I have soft sand. They like to be on the sand bed. They can get irritated or cut from sharp rocks or sharp gravel, so sand is best for them. They like to be in kind of medium flow, like you can see right here, where it's moving enough to keep sand and detritus off of them, and that way they'll keep happy. If you can't put it in a high flow place, it'll do okay in a low flow place, but just make sure it doesn't get sand and detritus built up on it, so spray it off if it does get that. They love being fed, like all LPS corals. Feeding them just kind of makes them super happy. They explode with growth. And this coral is actually one of those corals super easy to feed because it just grabs right onto any piece of food that's given into it and almost sucks it into its mouth immediately, especially if you stick the food close to its mouth. So it likes lower light because it likes to be on the bottom. They come from the bottom of the ocean on the sand bed, so it can handle lower light. I mean, it can handle brighter lights too, but it does good in lower light as well. Since they're kind of a detritus feeding, bottom feeding kind of coral, they can do okay in a little less clean of a tank. Like most LPS, they do good in not as clean of a system as SPS tanks, but they can live, fairly well in fairly dirty water. Which you should never try and have dirty water, but sometimes low or higher nutrient tanks just have them, and they'll do just fine in those tanks. So it's a really hardy coral, from what I've found anyways. As long as you get a healthy looking one from the beginning, make sure it's not receding into itself or anything, then they do great. Something to keep in mind with this coral is when you're moving it or taking it out of the water, tap on it under the water so it retracts fully into its skeleton. Never pull it out of the water while it's out of its skeleton or has any of its tissue out of its skeleton, because the way it can trap water, and if you pull it out of the water, it can actually cut its own tissue on its skeleton from the water weight and shred the coral from underneath. So make sure it's good and sucked into its skeleton before you remove it from the water if you have to, or you could risk damaging the tissue structure on the underside of this coral. Other than that, they're fairly easy coral. They grow fairly fast, especially if fed. They like lower light, medium flow, or all the way up to, they can handle higher flow too. But my best experience with them is they like medium flow, kind of like you see right here, where the tentacles are just moving around a little bit, and low to medium light, and a sand bed. They do best on the sand bed. And like I said, fine sand is good. Just make sure that if you put them in a low flow area, they're not going to get detritus built up on them. So that's today's coral of the day, the fungia coral. Very cool coral, looks good in almost any tank, and they fill up that bottom space of sand where a lot of corals just don't look good. But this one just kind of sits right flat on it and looks great. So it's a really cool coral. Would definitely suggest it to people with a well-cycled tank and already have some other LPS things going on in there. So go out and see if you can find one and try it out. I'm sure you'll be happy with it just like I've been happy with all of mine. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this video helps, and keep a lookout for more coral care videos in the future.